Good morning, everybody. Hi there. Welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. And if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll reveal the results at the end. My name is Sean Goldsmith. I am the co-founder of a company called Grow Global, and we are specialists in the franchising sector. We help small businesses go national and larger businesses go international with their business through franchising. It's a very, very smart move in terms of business model, and I'll take you through a little bit about that a bit later. But in the meantime, what we're going to be talking about today is international franchising, and whether or not your business, whether it's a franchise or not, has the capability of going international. Now, over the past 12, maybe 13 weeks, we've been inundated with companies who are looking to expand their reach because the world has become a much smaller place because of the prevalence of Zoom and because of all the things that we're doing at the moment that really just allow us to both sort of outsource a lot of our workforce. We're much closer to consumers, and even supply chain is sorting itself out quite well at the moment. We've had contacts from countries like Australia, big pharmaceutical companies from Japan, all over the place, basically looking at how they can expand their business through franchising on an international basis. And there's quite a good reason for that. Many of these companies pre-COVID actually did have branches out and available. I'll use one example in particular. There's a very well-known clothing manufacturer and retailer in Australia. And prior to COVID, they had a number of branches out all over the place, near the Sydney Opera House, various other places, and quite a decent high-end business. COVID hit, and all of the stores were company-owned. And what immediately had to happen was that company had to take those stores back, close them down, do all the negotiations with the landlords, and effectively just started almost a wholesale model, getting their product out as opposed to owning the stores. Now, we were talking to them, and they were discussing all the various things that happened, what actually made that occur, and we started talking about how franchising would have potentially helped them to maintain their presence out there. And the reason for that is very, very simple. Even here in the UK, as a single entity, you get single support, right? So you're able to apply for your loans and etc. as a single company. As a franchise network, what happens is each of your franchisees have the ability to be able to apply for support, for loans, and all of the other things that come from being part of that kind of organization, and as well as being an individual. So it became very, very clear to this company and a few others actually that we're speaking to, that franchising was not only a way of very rapidly being able to deploy their offering, both nationally as well as internationally, but it also became a very, very smart way to basically diversify the risk of the brand. Makes sense when you think about it from that point of view. So international expansion is something that can happen for both small as well as big companies. I think naturally speaking, people would assume that you have to be you have to have national coverage before you can start going international. But really, that also depends on the type of sector that you're working in. So another example of companies that we are helping go international at the moment are in the education sector. So there was a massive call out from South Africa in particular, where the demand for anything to do with education for children, has completely gone off the scale because of COVID, because of what's happened. Parents are really trying to make sure that their children catch up and, are at least sort of achieving international standards to a certain extent. So, there's been a massive demand of brands going out to places like South Africa. And in those cases, there are a number of small education, children's businesses that have the capability of being able to take their model operationally, put it in a box, and then send it over to the international operations, so that they can then, just pick up the operations and the structure and the processes that are in place, and be able to offer their services to the local communities. In many, many cases, what franchisors and companies are doing this for is not necessarily because of the massive financial returns, but it is really because they truly believe in their service and their brand, and they just really want to help. So that's really become a quite a big thing. The care sector has definitely been looking at internationalizing. Again, places like Africa are really interesting because there really isn't a private kind of care sector as you would get in the UK and various other countries from a franchising point of view. But yeah, so it's really interesting how different sectors, different companies can take this, their actual concept and then take that abroad and really, expand it without having the huge capital expenditure that you would normally have. And that's a big consideration too, because as you know, if the franchise model is applied, what happens is the funding for that expansion effectively comes from that franchisee. So the franchisee would pay a franchise fee for the training and for the operations and for the support and the brand and all of that stuff. But what they then do is they are also responsible for the fit out of potentially a retail outlet. All of the associated costs they take upon themselves to basically get their operation up and running. Franchisors do a fantastic job at actually supporting businesses when they launch internationally. But yeah, so these are all key considerations that can make a massive big difference. Other examples of brands that are going international at the moment, pet care brands. So there are brands like dog hydrotherapy, dog first aid, even the pet sitting and the grooming businesses and franchisers. Are really seeing a lot of traction abroad because of what's been happening, and because the world has got a little bit smaller because of COVID. So things to consider before going international. The large proportion of the success or failure of international operations actually has less to do with the physical business and the application and the processes of the business than you think. Actually, one of the largest considerations is really just being able to internationalize your offering. So there's a well-documented list of British companies that have gone over to the States that have absolutely failed. And equally, there's a large number of US companies and international companies coming into Britain and failing. And, one of the key reasons for that is because people incorrectly assume that because we watch the same movies and we get the same jokes and we do, we are very, very similar in so many ways, that is immediately going to mean that somebody will, completely just get the brand that we're taking abroad or, for that they're bringing in. So there's an example many years ago of a massive burger chain called Wendy's that came into the UK, and Burger King and McDonald's were well established, and Wendy's was trying to come into the UK, and it was just going to work perfectly, and everything was going to be great. And a few years later, they had to exit, go back to America, rethink their strategy. And they've only just in the last few months decided to start re-entering the UK market. And I think with a much different kind of outlook. They were really, really focused on the cultural differences, finding out exactly what works, what doesn't work. They really did a huge amount of research before entering the UK market again, because believe it or not, the UK is a small island, but packs a large punch when it comes to just retail and takeaways in the food industry, etc. So which is pretty interesting. Now we're going to go on to questions in a minute or two, and really looking forward to those coming through. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to just put them in the comments section, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or any of the platforms that you're watching on at the moment. We'd love to have those questions come in. We definitely think that, I guess the last thing that I'd like to say on the international expansion is, if you are thinking about doing the international expansion, then it's very, very, very important to find somebody who knows what's going on with regards to expanding. So finding the right partners in the country that you're going into, whether it be Dubai or any of those locations. You really do need to find somebody who's going to help you understand the cultural nuances and be able to internationalize things and be able to look at all of your documentation and figure out whether or not all the words kind of translate as you would want them to translate, rather than potentially cause hassles and miscommunication. So very, very important to do that. So anyway, right, so I'm going to jump on to questions, and the first question we have is from Debbie from Twitter. Apart from the brand recognition with consumers, I don't think I fully understand the benefits of joining a franchise. What can a franchise do for me that I don't do with my business on my own? Oh, look, Debbie, it really depends on where you're coming from, right? Because you see, the thing is, what franchising has always done well is it's an acceleration of success, right? So, I'm just going to give you a few statistics with regards to franchising versus, if you're opening your own business. So I've done both, right? When I was 21 years old, I arrived in the UK and I started a recruitment company, and next thing I knew, I had about 800 people working for me for Amazon and various other brands. And it's hard work, right? It's a lonely place to be. You never know what you don't know, and you've got to learn the lessons as you go on. And sometimes, just when you think you've learned the lesson, you make a decision that you think is absolutely right, and it goes wrong again. Now, what happens with typically with a franchise is that person that's gone through that rocky road, that's made all the mistakes and paid all the price for those mistakes. Those people are the people who then become franchisors, and what they then do is they guide you, right? And they say to you, right, Debbie, don't do it this way. If you do it that way, this is what the result's going to be. So what they do is they guide you through that all the potholes in the road. They help you make the decisions, based on experience. Then what you also have is you have this growing community of other franchisees who are in the same boat as you, right? And as I mentioned before, being in small business is a very, very lonely place. Within a franchise, you have a community. You have people you can bounce ideas off of. You have people who you can speak to who totally get what you're going through. Whether that be through the highs or the lows, it's really, really, really powerful. And you won't believe the actual effect that has on your actual business itself, because if you can just keep yourself motivated and you feel like you're in a supportive environment, it is absolutely phenomenal how you can weather most storms. And we've seen that with the franchise community over the last year. Everybody assumed that there was going to be absolute chaos and number of franchise brands failing, etc. And it just wasn't the case. In fact, almost the opposite. The feedback that the franchisors have had from franchisees has been, sometimes brings a tear to your eye, where the people are basically just saying, look, we wouldn't have made it without the support of head office and without the support of our fellow, franchisees. So to answer your question, what you're doing is you're accelerating your success within a supportive environment. So you can do all of these things yourself, but the reality is it's going to take you, unless you're very lucky, going to take you much longer to be able to kind of figure out what that formula is. And I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is just a statistic. So the most recent NatWest survey with regards to franchising, basically concluded that 93.7% of all franchisees are not only still in business after 3 years, but they are actually profitable. And if you take that, which is in stark contrast to sort of, your traditional DIY, do-it-yourself startup business, just the sums, just the statistics give you a better chance of making it. So I guess that's my point of view from franchising. I hope that answered the question properly. Connor from Facebook Messenger. I started home cooking business in lockdown with deliveries made on Deliveroo and Uber Eats, etc. It's going well. Now restrictions are easing. I'm wondering if I should open an actual restaurant, stick to what I've got, or see if there's an opportunity to franchise. What should I consider for each option? Connor, actually really, really interesting. I helped a young lady just down in Southampton, and she was doing specifically meals for two. And she was only doing deliveries, I think just her husband basically was doing all the deliveries within a 3 to 4 mile radius of her house. And she absolutely flew, and she started the process of franchising. So, What the franchising does for you, if you do decide to go down that route, especially from a food point of view, is it allows you to contractually standardize things. So, you can insist upon certain methodologies, certain equipment being used, etc. The brand has to be used in a certain way, deliveries have to be done in a certain way, etc. So, it gives you ultimate control. And when it comes to food, you really do want that, right? You don't really want, say for instance, one of your people or your branch managers, if you open a branch, you don't want them experimenting with the type of food that's being delivered. You don't want them taking shortcuts, all of that. With a franchise, at least what you have is absolute ability to be very specific as to how everything gets done. With regards to your other questions, opening a physical restaurant, stick to what you've got. I would stick to what you've got for now. Physical restaurants are a very, very, very different thing. Physical restaurants, you're talking leases, long leases, very, very expensive. And I guess the last thing I would say to you is that there's a massive emergence of dark kitchens at the moment. So, effectively, your sort of delivery model is effectively like a dark kitchen, right? It's not got a physical front end. Now, everyone from the biggest burgers chains, the pizza companies, all of them are busy converting their kitchens into multi-use kitchens. So one in particular, there's a brilliant brand that does noodles here in the UK, homegrown brand. Front end, the restaurant is all about noodles, right? The whole experience, everything is absolutely noodles. That's what you get from the waiters. Out the back door, they're doing pizza, they're doing Italian, they're doing various other foods, right? And I guess lastly, the probably one of the greatest examples of a dark kitchen I've seen is also a UK guy. And he literally just goes from town to town, finds a light industrial unit and identifies the 3 to 4 sort of takeaways that are missing in the area. So it might be Thai or it might be Indian curry or something like that. He goes on to Fiverr.com, has a menu made up, and he just sets up a kitchen in a light industrial unit on the outskirts of town and hires some delivery drivers. So, there's a lot of options for you. I hope that helps, or at least just inspires you to get some ideas on what to do over there. Again, feel free, just reach out if you need any more advice. I'm really happy to make that. What makes a business ready to go international? What are the key ingredients you need? Well, and this is a question from Eric on Twitter. Eric, really, it's about the strength of your model, right? And whether or not your model is actually something that can be transferred, and if it can be standardized and systemized. And then of course, I guess the most important question or answer is really whether there's a demand for your business abroad. So we are working with a Middle Eastern company at the moment, very, very high end, and they do jewelry for babies. And when I say jewelry for babies, I mean the £2,000 earring type jewelry for babies. And one of the key things that we've been looking at and doing is just doing research to figure out whether or not that business is actually viable in the international scene. We take a look at the brand, we take a look at the branding, how that translates. Basically, look at every sort of element of this. Once the viability study has been done, it's a fairly simple process of being able to take the business abroad. But yeah, there's a lot of research that goes into it, and of course it's all about demand, right? And that's just a normal sort of decision, I guess, that a business person makes, and whether or not they think that demand justifies the effort of going international. So I hope that answered your question, relatively well. Bella on Instagram, great to see much of the hospitality sector reopening recently. Do you have any advice for what businesses or franchises in this sector should be doing right now to keep the income boom going? Bella, I genuinely think that if I just use our local pub, we've got quite a nice pub down the road over here. Their delivery model, they really hit it hard. It's a high-end pub. The guy's been on Saturday Morning Kitchen, a few times, that type of thing. And really, they've built a great name for themselves on the delivery model. I would basically just create this hybrid, right? So if you do have a restaurant or if you do have a food concept, really consider the dark kitchen option. and make sure that, you've got what you are passionate about, and, whether it's a French cuisine or whatever it might be, in that kind of sector, focus on that, make sure that that works. But in the back end also, just take a look at what your options are with regards to, just keeping up with what's going on in the world. And I think a lot of habits have changed, and, there will be, I think, a resurgence of people going out to restaurants and, eating out. I think that'll happen for a while. And then I think it's going to peter out a little bit, because people are very, very used to, just being at home, and having exceptional food actually delivered straight to home. So, I would definitely look at, just making sure that you've got all bases covered, because there will be people who will order from you that are just not the kind of people who want to go out. So yeah, I definitely take a look at that. Right, so let me just check over here. Yeah, I hope that helped, Bella. Jody from Facebook Messenger: I own a high street shop and thought about joining a franchise before. The only thing that put me off were some benchmark targets they set. What should you do if you don't think that their targets are achievable? So Jody, they would be able to provide you with evidence that, through their model and with their brand, those numbers should be achievable. So a franchise wouldn't necessarily, come to you and say, look, you need to hit numbers that are unachievable, because it really doesn't work for them either. For them to effectively have a failure on their hands really affects their brand and all of that. So what you'd probably find is, you'd be able to speak to other franchisees, ask the franchisor for their projections and their numbers that they've got, and ask them how many units this is actually based on. And, in reality, if the numbers, are the numbers, and, that's what the other franchisees have been achieving on average. And of course, look, just what you need to make sure of is the numbers that you're being provided with aren't just of the top 10%, right? Because with every single franchise, you've got sort of 10 to 15% of the franchisees are exceptional, right? They're really, really hitting big numbers. And with a high street shop, that could be because of footfall, it could be because of the area, it could be because of 1,000 different reasons. And then of course you're going to have the other stores that are really, really bad. And again, the same reasons, that will make the good ones good, could make the bad ones bad. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you've got the middle ground numbers. The second thing that you want to do is actually speak to the support people. So, the person selling you the franchise is always going to be very, very positive. They're going to be quite charismatic, etc. What you want to do is speak to the person in the support team, because support people have no time for beating around the bush. They'll literally just say to you, nah, it's not going to work for you, or they'll be quite direct, and sometimes that's a good thing. But I wouldn't necessarily worry about their targets, because they should be based on averages. They should be based on fact. And on top of that, they're going to be providing huge amounts of support and marketing people and all of that other stuff. So take a look at it. And again, if you want me to have a quick squiz through it, I know most of the franchises in the UK, so I'd be able to give you some guidance if you like. Right. So moving on to Will on Instagram DMs. How do you build a team that you can trust in an international market? I'd want to ensure quality to make sure the experience for customers was the same, but worry about cultural differences. Well, what happens traditionally speaking is you would sell a master license, right? So what you do is there's various methods of doing this, but typically a franchise would expand through a master license agreement, right? So what you get is somebody who is effectively going to become you in that other country. And that's when you make sure that your the cultural differences, etc., are addressed. So that person over there would pay you, let's call it £100,000 or £200,000, sometimes a few £1 million, effectively for the right to be able to take your model and then franchise that. So what you would then do is you'd have a number of different sort of income streams depending on your product or your service that you're providing. So you may have income stream from the supply chain. That franchise, that master franchisee, after paying you that initial sum, which a large part of that will go to setting up everything and getting all the logistics right. But every franchisee that they sign up, right, will pay that master franchisee, I don't know, anywhere between 8 and sometimes 20% royalty, depending on the industry and what they're doing, and then you would receive sort of 10 to 15% of that, right? As a residual income, effectively, because if you choose the right master franchisee, really what you're just doing is a bit of coaching and a bit of support. Your branding team from internally will do a lot of the work, but again, with franchising, a lot of your work is upfront. So the first year or two are really kind of support heavy, and then generally speaking, if you've done your job well with the training, etc., your international operations are very, very easy to manage. So I worked with a company called Anytime Fitness. I think they're in something like 30 countries around the world. And the head office function is actually really small, considering what they're managing. But you can absolutely make sure that the quality of service that you're receiving, or that your franchisees are providing, is standard, because it's contractual, so it's commercially contractual. I hope that helps a bit, Will. Mary from Twitter DM, when it comes to investing in a franchise, what are your top considerations? I'm considering an in-home care franchise that seems to be growing fast. Mary, you're absolutely right. They are growing like the clappers at the moment. And I don't think, I'm exaggerating when I say that Britain would have been a very, very different place had it not been for the in-home care franchises. Everyone from Right at Home, Bluebird Care, Caremark, Apollo Care. I mean, the list is endless of the franchises that basically kept the world going, because they were looking after people in their own homes, and they never ever got any credit for that. But if you are looking at going into that sector, I think you're onto a winner. Again, feel free to reach out to me. I do know most of them, and I can give you the pros and cons of each. But the top considerations basically is meet the team, understand exactly how they are trying to progress. It's a very competitive market, right? So we spoke to some of the franchisees down in Southampton for a brand called Right at Home. And, when they first started, they had something like 15 competitors in their area. And they currently have 40 or something like that. They're still doing really well. And this is the one big benefit of a franchise is, people, when they choose a care giver or, a provider, there's a certain safety in joining a brand, right? Or at least deciding on going with a brand, because it's big, and there's ways of putting through complaints if you have any complaints, and it's just a bit of a safety zone. So franchises do very, very well, in those kind of sectors. So have a think about it. There's also medical recruitment franchises if you are a bit more averse to the paperwork, because there is a lot of paperwork with in-home care. But yeah, any help you need, please feel free, and I'll be happy to help you with that. Right, Daniela from Facebook Messenger. Considering the times we've been living through recently, I would have thought maintaining a franchise right now could be quite risky. How much liquid capital would someone need before they break even? Oh, yeah, honestly, Daniela, under normal circumstances, well, actually pre-pandemic, if I'd known what was going on, I would have said exactly the same thing. But, the franchises have been incredibly resilient throughout all of this. I mean, just to give you a very quick example, I'm just thinking about the swimming sort of sector, children's swimming tuition. I mean, those guys were absolutely shut down. There's no wiggle room whatsoever. Very, very few of the franchisees, went out of business. A lot of them, qualified for assistance. And when they came out of lockdown, they had over 2,000 people in the queue waiting to get back into the pools. So what happens is, if it's the risk profile that you're looking at, being part of a big group and having a support team and having people around you, right, is now very, very much proven that it's an outstanding option compared to being on your own and trying to go through the same thing. So with regards to how long before they break even, I mean, typically speaking, with the franchises that I've been involved in, people would break even 6 months, 8 months, sometimes a year and a half, depending on what they're wanting. If they've got big sort of facilities like gyms, it might take them 3 years, maybe 4 years to break even. Some of the restaurant groups, same thing. But typically speaking, if it's a service-based business, break even can happen very, very quickly. I was involved in a franchise that did window shutters, and one of the chaps up in Birmingham did over £600,000 in his first year, and that was based off of a £25,000 franchise. So it can be very, very, very rapid. Anyway, right. So just quickly moving on to Constance from Instagram. I know that running a pilot is a great way to figure out if a potential franchisee is right for the business. How do you get the most out of a pilot run? Look, we actually specialize in running pilots for franchise operations. So if you're a franchisor and you're running a pilot operation, one of the most important things that you can do is to try and remove yourself from influencing what's going on over there. Because, what you've got is you've got your business model, right? And you are trying to prove your business model. If you as a franchisor are heavily involved in that pilot operation, you kind of skew your results, because your influence and your energy and your need to want to make sure that pilot works, can actually skew the results a lot. And we see this in a lot of franchises where the first 3 franchisees, typically speaking, will get huge amounts of support compared to the franchisees that come after that. So if I was to give you the best advice possible, I would get somebody, an external management consultant or somebody like that, to effectively, oversee what's happening in the pilot operation and make sure that you are not influencing it too much. Because if you manage to do that, if you are able to prove your concept from a neutral basis, right, then you know that you've got something that average Joe can pick up and run with and actually make some money out of. If you are putting undue influence on that and putting all of your resources and support into it, it can really change the face of things. So that's probably my best advice, for pilot operations. But again, like I said, we actually professionally do these for a number of franchisors. So if you need any guidance or any advice, please feel free to reach out. Right. So we had a poll out and we said, do you think that your business has the potential to go global? Now, this is really interesting, right? So 33% of you said yes and 67% of you said no. And actually, I'm very surprised that 33% of you said yes, because typically speaking, it would be about 10% of companies that we speak to feel that they have the ability to go international. If you have the ability to go international, it is so worthwhile, but you've got to do it properly. As with anything, right? Most of the work that you're going to do is in the run-up to going international. It's not actually the process of landing on the other side, etc. That's the easy bit. It's all the work that you do before it that's absolutely crucial. So brilliant, guys. That's absolutely fantastic. Right. So we have just done the poll, and I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in today. If you want to get in contact with me, you can email me on sean@growglobal.com. So it is GROE global.com, or visit our website, which is the same, www.growglobal.com. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Johan Gori, an accountant with QuickBooks expert. Tune in to get advice on how to kickstart your business as we transition out of lockdown. A reminder that if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. I really enjoyed answering your questions today, and as I said, please feel free to contact me. More than happy to give advice, no strings attached. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye. Thank you.